I'm out in my shed again, being distracted by the thing I said wouldn't distract me, but I just wanted to get this bit done before I sort of put it away and get back onto the Riley. I have made up a little sort of block thing that will remove the advance from the distributor, so it'll just make it a fixed distributor. And I cut a piece of steel. It's steel plate, so it's just mild steel, which is horrible to machine. It's really kind of gummy almost. It came up okay, but I find it really hard to get a good finish on it. Also, I've got crappy tools, so that doesn't help. And this little thing fits on there like that, little pins. Turns out this plate isn't completely flat, which is interesting, but should be good enough. And then this piece fits on there and should drop into its holes. It's quite a tight fit. I'd like to say that's through my impressive machining ability, but it's not. It's just kind of chance. You can see it fits better one way than the other, but when that is on there, there's no play between the two. Like I said, I'd like to say I put this on the mill and machined it perfectly. I didn't. It needed a little bit of hand fettling, shall we say, to make it all fit together. And it kind of needed little pockets milled out of it to clear the way that all this sort of fits together. But that'll do it. That is now solid. So the distributor will spin and that won't go anywhere. The reason I don't bother filming any of this is because, one, I'm not a machinist, so I'm probably not doing it right. I just do what works for me. I'm sure there are proper ways to do everything. If you're just making stuff with a hacksaw and a grinder, nobody complains how you do it. If you're machining things and you've got a mill or tools like that and you do it wrong, you'll get told pretty quickly, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you're trying to improve, but sometimes you just want to whack something up, knock something up and get it done, which is what I did here. So the other reason I don't film anything is it just takes too long. I came out after work. I've got a couple of hours tonight to do this, and this has taken me an hour and 3/4. So if I was trying to film everything as well, I wouldn't get it done. So I don't bother. If you want good machining channels, there's plenty of those out there, and they show you how to do stuff properly, which is good. But I think that'll do for a hack little generator engine that I'm trying to get going. That should work. I think as well, I know the engine won't run very well with advance, and I definitely need to set it up so the ignition is retarded, so that when you try to start it, you don't break your hand when it kicks back. I don't know how much advance you need to get it to do more than just idle. Obviously it'll idle without that advance, I imagine, but how well it runs without any advance in it, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. But like I say, it doesn't have to do anything, it just has to run. Of course, you can see this on the Riley actually. The Riley, the advance is totally mechanical, so there's nothing automatic in this at all. You just manually have to do the advance retard. I've just noticed my little thing there is rusting a bit, so that needs a bit of an oil. And of course the engine will run quite happily with it retarded. It just won't produce any power, but it will run. So I think this will be fine with that static timing there. If I really wanted to get fancy, I would make up a bracket here so you can rotate the entire distributor body. I think it's probably safer to leave it fixed and leave it retarded so that you don't end up with it in the wrong position when you try to start it. Yeah, that's a simple little piece. That's all it took. I'll probably just give that a rub down with some of that ACF 50 so it doesn't rust, because it is mild steel. I'm guessing the rest of this is just steel as well, so I'll give it a bit of an oil and reassemble this. I'm going to put the weights somewhere nice and safe so I don't lose them, and reassemble it. I thought I should take a little bit of pride in my crappy work, and I at least gun blued the steel, just mainly to help stop it rusting. I don't think it'll rust in there though. And that should work pretty well. It spins quite nicely still. The weight of that steel bar is about the same as the sort of lead weights that came out of it. The position is different, but I mentioned in one of the other films that that doesn't matter because you can rotate the body to any position to get the actual timing right. So I'll just put the points cover thing back on, and that'll be that done for now. Just a quick update tonight on this Coventry Climax engine. I can't really do anything on the Riley, although I did touch up the paint on the petrol tank. I sanded out the runs and just gave it another quick coat of paint. But I've got I slipped a disc in my neck a few years ago, and every so often I still get like a pinched nerve, and it's just very bad at the moment, so it's limiting what I can do. I'm just doing a few little bits and pieces. I pinned the distributor shaft to the distributor body. That all seems pretty good now, so that's in place. Still need to get a cap and leads for it. I've got a coil I can use. I've had that coil sitting around for donkey's years, so that should be usable. But the good thing is, based on some comments people have left me around other similar engines, I was able to hunt down the operating manual for the actual generator set. That was the trick. Instead of looking for the engine itself, I had to search for the whole generator unit that it was used on. This is what it was. It does, I think, mention at the end of this, my printer's running out of toner, pretty sure somewhere near the back it did mention that this engine is or was also used on fire pumps, but I don't know where that's gone. So this manual has all of the service info and all of the documentation for the engine as well as the generator. So it gives me all the specs here. It's an 850cc, 7.76 RAC horsepower, 23 horsepower at 3500 RPM. It's got the firing order, the compression ratio. It tells me all the clearances, what the magneto type is, all sorts of really useful information. What the plugs are, how to start it up, all the capacities, what sort of oil to use. So pretty much everything I need to know. And what I've discovered from that is I think my fuel pump is missing a primer lever, which I think goes on there, or should be on there. So I will probably pull the fuel pump off, open it up, just make sure it's clean. And I think I will also need to take off the carburetor and make sure that's clean. I can't easily get into adjust it or oil it where the butterfly goes through, and that's sticking. So I think the best way to do that will be take it off and clean it. The rest of it looks pretty okay. But yeah, to find this manual, I've noticed this a lot over the years on the internet. You can find manuals like this. I think somebody sent me a link to a shop in the UK that was selling a copy of it for 25 quid. And I don't like that. These are nearly 100-year-old manuals. If you are selling a printed copy that you're going to send out to someone, sure, then there's some value in it. But if I can just download the file as a PDF, you know, I should be able to do that. It should be public information now. So I ended up doing a search through the Internet Archives. I found a forum post from literally 20 years ago that mentioned this site had a copy of the manual for this generator set, and I was able to trawl back through the Internet Archives and actually find the link to the PDF, which is still there. So I was able to just download the file and print it out. So yeah, it kind of should give me everything I need in order to get this thing going. If it goes. I mean, it may not work, but I imagine things like this, unless it was actually used a lot, shouldn't have a lot of hours on it. So I'll put in the description the link to where I found that document, just in case it's any use to anyone else coming after me, because links disappear over time, that kind of thing. If anyone is looking for a copy of that document and wants it, just get in touch, and I'm quite happy to send it to you. So yeah, that's really all I can do today. The other thing I'll do eventually is I will clean up the engine. I'm not going to water blast it. I decided that was a bit too dangerous. I don't know where water could get into it, but at some point I will take it outside and give it a gentle degreasing, just to get the really caked on grime off it. I will probably remount the petrol tank and the little oil pressure gauge. I might as well just use this fuel tank because it's not in period, of course, but it'll do the job. I might repaint that though. The other thing I'd like to do is take it off this temporary sort of, or this wheeled arrangement, or cut those off. The main reason is because it makes it too tall, and hand cranking this thing is a bit tricky because it's just very top heavy on this, and I'd be worried that you'd try to crank it and it's going to move around or fall over. So I'd rather have it sitting lower to the ground, which means I may end up making a smaller sort of trolley for it. It's probably worth seeing if it actually runs before I do that though. I can always weight it down when the time comes to actually try it out. The other thing I guess I need to do is get a fan belt for it. Although again, just to get it to fire, you don't need the cooling system there if you're only going to run it for a little while. It is interesting, this manual is actually quite well written. It's kind of no nonsense, pretty straightforward, tells you everything you need to do. But it does mention in there about not running engines for short periods of time, and what it says is because you need to use choke, you run it very fuel rich when you start the engine. That fuel, some of it doesn't get burned. It goes down the cylinder walls into the sump and dilutes the oil. And then they say what happens is if you don't run the engine up to operating temperature, that petrol in the oil just dilutes the oil. So they say by running it up to temperature, it causes the petrol to evaporate out of the oil. I'm no idea if that's actually correct or not, if that's how it works, but it sounds plausible. I've always been told, yeah, you shouldn't run engines for short amounts of time. You should always let them warm up. I always thought it was to do with water condensation in them rather than condensing out or evaporating out the petrol. So interesting, these old manuals. I need to read through the whole thing. I haven't had a chance today. I've only just finished work, so I'll read through that since I can't actually do much mechanical stuff, and see what it tells me. I'm doing these generator films or generator engine films separately just so I can keep them in a separate playlist. Somebody might be interested in these and not care anything about Riley's, or vice versa, so I'll just make these short little ones. The distributor is in there. I still need to sort out a distributor cap and a anti-clockwise rotor. Somebody did mention that I think it's Morris 8E series have a distributor that goes the right direction, so a clockwise direction. So these little Lucas distributors for these D4 DH4As, I can't remember what the number is, the A means anti-clockwise. If you look at it from the top, the rotor goes this way round normally. So it's anti-clockwise from the engine's point of view. It's as if you were looking out. So the direction on the top of the distributor is opposite to what you'd think. So a normal anti-clockwise distributor like this, you'd see this going around that way. At least that seems to be how it works. You can see I have pulled off the fuel pump, and that's what's buzzing away in the ultrasonic cleaner. That turns out to be an AC Sphinx Type Y, apparently, and you can still get rebuild kits for them, and you can even get rebuild kits in New Zealand, which is amazing, but I think I'll be ordering from overseas. We look over here. That was what came out of the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm trying different solutions to see what works. This was basically water, some dishwashing soap, and some CLR. This is why I need the rebuild kit. This is the diaphragm from the fuel pump. That's shot. That's not going to work. And the pump has these little, they look like Paxilin hexagon things which make up the one-way valves inside there. And I believe the rebuild kit comes with those and the little springs that go behind them and all the gaskets and the washers. So I should be able to buy the kit. I did actually find a place in the UK that looks like they've got new old stock, similar ones. But I imagine those also need a rebuild kit or need rebuilding. So I'll probably just get the rebuild kit and go with the body I've got. And I've also pulled the carburetor off because that's going to need some work. To get the carburetor off, you undo these two bolts, but I had to undo the inlet manifold because otherwise the carb, as you pull it down, gets stuck on this linkage, which is the throttle linkage or the throttle control. So I had to undo this, slide this out, then I could drop the carb down. Carburetor is a little Zenith, British made Zenith. You can see the sort of pot metal it's made out of, it's all coming apart. That's what seems to happen to this stuff over time. It just breaks apart. So this should be usable. I'm going to clean all of this up, of course. I'll strip it down, and I may fill in some of that with JB Weld just to see if it'll hold up. That in there is the choke. You see the butterfly, and then the throttle butterfly is tiny. It's down in there. So it's probably only about 1/2 inch diameter. It's like on those little weed eater type engines. And the other thing I've noticed is these screws on this little arm are wound all the way in almost. So there's almost no opening on that throttle disc. So the manual will tell me how to set all of that up, but this will go through the ultrasonic cleaner, and then I'll strip it all down, clean it up, and see how much of it is usable. I think if I can save the gaskets, it should be fine to use as it is. Like I say, I'll JB Weld up where the pot metal is coming apart. And that's really it on the engine. I still want to do something about putting it on a different base. A friend of mine asked me if I was going to clean it all up and repaint it and that kind of thing, but no, I'm not. I'm going to try and keep it. I'm going to degrease it because there is a lot of really thick muck on it. So I'll get it clean and then I'll just oil it down and I'll leave it as unrestored as possible. So petrol tank, I'll probably redo how that's mounted. It would make more sense to be mounted up here somewhere. And I'll probably paint that black and I'll coat the inside of it. But for the amount of time this is going to run, that's more than a big enough petrol tank. So yeah, that's where we're at on this. It's getting a bit confusing sometimes filming stuff about the Coventry Climax engine and stuff about the Riley and keeping the two separate. I need to think about what I talk about. But I've been playing around with my ultrasonic cleaner and various other cleaning things to figure out the best way to actually clean up some of these parts. So this is the fuel pump from the engine and this is the carburetor. And what I've actually discovered works best for me is to degrease parts, I use just water and a couple of tablespoons of washing soda, calcium carbonate, and a couple of drops of washing up liquid. I don't think it matters what washing up liquid you use. I've used both the palm olive and the Sunlight. I just buy whatever's cheapest. And that gives you a good alkaline type solution, and that cuts through all the oil and grease and muck on the parts. So I usually give them an hour or so in the ultrasonic with that, give them a clean off in hot soapy water to get rid of all the alkaline stuff. And then what I've actually found works quite well, and I found this out by accident, was on this piece, this is steel, these linkages. So I ended up getting all the grease and crap off them, and I put that into my evaporust. I've got a bucket of evaporust here overnight and left it in there for a couple of days, and that definitely takes the rust off all the steel parts like the nuts and bolts and the springs, and it doesn't affect the casting, but I found it actually makes it cleaner. And I think it might be because it's very slightly acidic, but it leaves the parts with a sort of dull grey finish. You can sort of see that on the inside there, but you can easily clean that off with a brush, or I've been using a grey scotch pad, and just a quick rub of that and it comes up really clean. So that works pretty well. The problem I have on this is the fuel pump. I think I can rebuild. You can get rebuild kits for that. They seem pretty standard. The float was holed, so I had to punch a couple of little holes in it, drill a couple of little holes, get the fluid out and then resolder it. That should be fixed now. Obviously the diaphragm is shot, that's completely gone, so that wasn't going to work. I don't think I'm going to need the priming lever because that was all broken on this. There's a little metal lever, that's part of it. That was part of the, whoops, the little thing that retains it. But this is hand cranked, this engine, so I think if you turn the hand crank a couple of times with the ignition off, that'll be enough to prime the fuel. And I'm only going from that little tank which is above the pump, so I think it'll self-prime anyway. The bigger problem is the carburetor. The top of it's okay. So according to the specs, and it's actually marked on the carburetor, it's got ASM there, which is the engine type, and 16U, which is the type of carb. It's a Zenith carburetor. This is the choke part, and you can see how the pot metal is just coming apart. This is what it does over time. It just falls apart. So I don't know how much life this has got left in it. I'm going to repair this with some JB weld to fill in those holes. You can see it's already got other pieces that are starting to break off. I did chip one piece off just to see how brittle it was up here, and it came off pretty easily. The float bowl is starting to get that as well. You can see it starts sort of cratering almost, or pushing up from the inside. It all just comes apart. I actually had this problem on my lathe. This block here is the same thing. It's just this kind of muck metal, this bearing block for the end of the lead screw, and I just ended up covering it with epoxy, which seems to have done the trick on that one for now. So I think JB weld will work for now. The problem is this carburetor, this 16U Zenith, I can't find out anything about it. So I've cleaned it all up. It's very simple. There is a simple jet which goes in here. And there's various passages that connect, but that jet basically goes down into this one here, and the fuel float goes in like this, and the fuel valve is at the top here. That seems to work. That's one piece. I took all that apart and cleaned it, and that's really all there is to it. There's almost nothing there. It's just straight Venturi. And I think that is why the throat on this is so tiny. I'm guessing it's to get the airflow up through the carb so that it can actually suck the fuel up. That would be my guess anyway. So what I'll do is I'll put this back together. There's no seals in it really. There was a copper washer. I think that was the only one. I'll put it back together. It's just a bunch of drillings and plugs, and I can use compressed air. I'll fill it up with something like methylated spirits and then blow compressed air through it and see if it sucks the fuel through. But other than that, I don't know where I would get a replacement one of these. I don't think you can even get parts. So if that doesn't work, I'd have to adapt it to a different sort of carburetor probably.